On this episode of NorCal News Now, we're speaking with Democratic Socialist U.S. Senate candidate David Hildebrand. I'm your host, Mike Richmond.
And I'm your co-host and Politico Aaron Haar.
Politico? I
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
Political consultant Politico.
Yeah.
Is that where that comes from?
I don't know. Maybe it does.
Wow. We just came up with something there, man. That's really cool. Good.
Well, I don't think people agree with that. There's a lot of people that are just into politics.
And they're called politicos.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go. All right. Well, let's, as much as we'd love to continue this conversation, let's actually turn to our guest, because this is a good one. Our guest on today's show is a pro-labor political activist and legislative analyst who's currently running to be California's next U.S. Senator. David Hildebrand, welcome to NorCal News Now.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you, David. Thank you for being here.
Great to have you, David. David's somebody I admire really well. As some circles that I've leaned to or find myself in, we have a great respect and admiration for him. He's a really smart guy. He's courageous out there. You know, he's really super excited all week to have him.
Well, it's a lot to live up to, David.
I'll try to from now on.
Well, especially for the next hour. Well, you know, on this show, we try to get kind of deep into the issues, but we also want to get a little bit into the person behind the candidate, so the voters can get to know you a little bit more. So in that vein, can you talk to us about a specific emotional moment that you've had in the last, say, 18 months? Boy, I wonder what happened 18 months ago. But say in the last 18 months or so. I don't remember.
Too bad there's nothing that's happened.
But talk about that period of time and an emotional moment that you maybe had that made you say, you know, wow, I'm doing a lot already, but I've got to now do more because I really don't like what's happening in the government.
Yeah, so my backstory is kind of like I worked basically outside of politics. I was basically a social media nerd. I would just get on and say my views on social media. When Bernie came out and started promoting single-payer health care, that's something that I had backed for like 10 years before then. So that was a moment that really got me involved. So I had never donated to a campaign, never volunteered, definitely never phone banked, never canvassed, definitely did not work in an office for a campaign before that time. And when he came out to do that, that really, you know, changed my mind and showed me that, okay, maybe there's a chance. I was very cynical in the past. Maybe there's a chance that we can actually have somebody for president even that's for the people. And I had not seen that before. And I had not felt like I had people to vote for before that. I'm not a party guy. I'm obviously running it as a Democrat, but I don't think that parties themselves are the answer. I think we need the issues to be addressed. And that's what I really felt Bernie was doing. And that's the angle he was coming from. So I went out and I started phone banking, and I hated that. So I don't know how people can do that. Thank you for the people who do that. But I cannot do that. That's not my thing. So I started canvassing, and I really enjoyed it. The walking, talking to people, getting to know people, getting people's reaction, and surprised that Bernie Sanders was still running in California by the time we came around here. And surprised that we were out there. And I actually kind of graduated through that process to become the staging location director at the Sacramento for Bernie, which did the whole Congressional 6 district. So I was sending out canvassers to the whole Congressional District 6. So this is this is someone who basically spent his political time online behind the scenes on the keyboard, going from that all the way to being a staging location director for an entire congressional district. This is the impact that had on my life. And since then, I've been involved in other campaigns. I helped out on the Los Rios School Board campaign for Valerie Martin. I helped out with some SB 562 canvassing. I've been literally in the streets for a lot of issues and canvassing and supporting a lot of issues and other candidates as well during this run.
And when you're hearing from other people, other people that are newly active about the environment that we're in and how people think about what they can personally do and bring to the conversation to establish some change here?
Well, I tell people we have California privilege. What that means is we are very shielded here. As the whole country went more red, at least on paper, we went more blue. So we went that way. We had 60% of people vote for Hillary, who was the Democrat in the race, obviously, and I think it was like 39 or 37% for Trump. So we still are a very Democratic state, but that's on the surface. And we need to look below that surface and see what's actually going on underneath. And unfortunately, our state legislators don't really represent the people of California or their districts. We have a lot of problems, especially in the LA area, where we have fracking going on in the middle of LA, underneath neighborhoods and schools, shopping centers, and this hasn't been addressed. And the reason why is because we have a lot of political money going in. So I think one of the biggest thing that unites like any side of the aisle, because there's more than just Republicans and Democrats, is corporate financing of elections. We need to get that out of the picture. It's not as easy as ending Citizens United, because we can still have corporate donations directly to campaigns. I, as a candidate, if I were so inclined, which I am not, could accept $5,000 from a corporate PAC, from each corporate PAC. So if Comcast sets up 20 corporate PACs, they can all donate $5,000 to my campaign. So there's other ways of getting corporate money into elections. There's also maxing out individual donations for everyone on the board of your corporation. So there's other ways of doing things. So we're seeing that being done now by other candidates. Feinstein will just go out and accept corporate donations. So she doesn't have to hide anything because she's just, out in the open with it. She accepts money from anywhere, basically. So a lot of the other candidates are doing the kind of more under the table. I'm not supporting I'm not against charter schools. And then you look at their information, their donation information, and then you have Eli Broad, the charter school king, basically donating to their campaign. So this is the issues that we're coming across now, to where that corporate money, they can run as a progressive or call themselves progressive and still accept those corporate donations and still vote for those corporations. And that's the issue I think we're facing. So that's why I'm running, and that's why I believe a lot of other people jumped in the race, is to run corporate free, to get that corporate money out of politics. We have like a loose slate across the whole state and country that are running corporate free, because that's one of the main issues that we're facing, is that the toxicity of that corporate money in the election system, and the toxicity of just wealth in general in the election system. If I were a millionaire like Dianne Feinstein, I could donate $5 million to my own campaign like she did. And the way you do that is you give yourself a loan to your own campaign. That way you can get the money back theoretically in the future through through donations from supporters. I think that whole system's like disgusting. So now you're saying someone who's rich, like Trump, can run for office, self-fund, and get into office based on their own funding. Now they don't have to answer to corporations, that's true. But they also don't have to answer to me and you. So that's the issue that I come across with self-funded campaigns. So when Dianne Feinstein can turn around, one day, and as a shot over the bow of all the other campaigns, loan herself $5 million, that's an issue in our campaign finance system that ending Citizens United will not address. So I want to go all the way to public funded elections. But I think the question was, why are people getting more in, and how are they doing that? Running for office. We've seen a lot of marches. We need to turn those marches into voter registration and votes. So that's another thing. We see some of the more mainstream marches, like the Women's March and the March for Our Lives. We see a lot of people in the streets. We need to turn those into votes, and we need to turn those into votes for the non-corporate candidates that will actually represent us.
Yeah, and we see that those corporate candidates, turning into a failed experiment of failed policy, because, last week we kind of went back and forth with the producer, Chris Smith, I did, and about that California is still the liberalist state in the union, and that when Republicans attack California for being the most liberal state, I mean, are we anymore? I mean, there are some other states that have done some things, and we just, having a Democratic majority, haven't pushed the needle that far. I mean,
yeah, and that's the thing, is we have the superficial, we have what I would call the mask, and then you tear the mask off and you see what's behind it. So if you were a Republican in California and you had all Republican values, and let's just say theoretically that you ran as a Democrat, you could win in a purple district, even maybe in a blue district. You could vote the same exact way Republicans do, and you could stay in the party, in the Democratic Party, and get promoted and endorsed and supported by the party, not depending on your votes. And that's what we're seeing with Feinstein, even more with people like Ami Bera, where they go and vote along with Trump, a certain percentage of the time, sometimes over 60% of the time, on really important issues to California, and they vote against us. And they still call themselves Democrat, and they're still a member of the party. So when it comes down to it, if you are only involved in like a gang mentality or a tribal mentality of as long as they're wearing the blue shirt, then they're our guy, that's where the issue comes up with me with parties. Like I mentioned before, I'm not really a party guy. I'm running as a Democrat. It's necessary to run as a Democrat, I believe, in California. But at the end of the day, it's the issues that matter. And if we can't back up the correct issues for California, then why are we claiming to do so? I mean, the Democratic Party arguably has the most progressive platform in the nation, but no one follows it. So, I mean, what's the point of having it? And now the party themselves, some of the conservative Democrat delegates in the party are chipping away at that platform even and taking stuff out of that platform that we previously had. We fought hard to get SB 562 and single payer onto the platform in word for word, so we're for single payer healthcare. And now they're chipping away trying to remove that. We stopped them from doing it before a convention, and they're going to try and do it again probably. So if we have corporate Democrats, they're going to act just like Republicans. They're just, a better version than a Republican looking at it from a relative view. So people will continue voting for the incrementalist approach because they're better than the other guys. Well, if we have California privilege, let's use that privilege and let's put people more to the left in office and let's actually be a threat to the Republicans. Because right now it's all superficial.
You hear a lot about, on the other side, the Republicans talk about rhinos. The Republicans in name only.
Yeah.
I don't hear a lot about dinos,
Yeah.
but I mean, maybe we should think about dinos and who we would label as a dino.
Yeah, so in the Democratic Party and the delegates that are more progressive, we do call people dinos,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a delegate myself, but I'm friends with many delegates in the party, and we do use that term dinos. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, what does it mean to be a Democrat anymore? And Kimberly Ellis ran her whole chair campaign on what it means to be a Democrat. And obviously she lost to Eric Bauman. But the message of that campaign is if we don't have a message to give people, then they're not going to turn to us. I mean, in the last election, love it or hate it, after the primary, we put forward a status quo candidate. And the other side put forward, a populist candidate. And we were in an election cycle, and arguably we still are, that's anti-establishment. So if we only produce an establishment corporate candidate in a race against an establishment corporate candidate on the other side, then we may win that race. But if we put that forward against an anti-establishment candidate, a populist candidate on the Republican side, or even on the conservative, even libertarian, any other party, we're going to lose that battle. And that's very possible here in California. And a lot of people would say, no, it's not. Well, that's exactly what we said for the general election in 2016. It's not possible that Trump could be elected. We're going to make fun of the way he looks. We're going to make fun of what he said. We're going to drag out stuff from his history. None of that worked. And the reason why is because of the status quo candidate attacking the populist candidate. It's never going to work. We saw that in the vote turnout. And we saw that in the Electoral College. It's not going to work that way. And I see people continuously attacking him based on personal levels. I won't retweet or repost anything where it like makes fun of his appearance or makes fun of something he said that was wrong, because it's side issues. We need to attack on the issues, because every time he distracts us by saying something stupid or by dressing funny or his hair blowing in the wind, then, that distracts us from what they're actually doing, which is repealing stuff like taking away bears' ears or a large section of it, trying to push anti-climate change, bills through Congress and getting them through and signed. And now they're attacking us for our pollution controls on vehicles. They want to try to repeal our authority to have higher standards than the rest of the country on our emissions. I don't know about you guys, but when you drive through the South Central Valley, you could cut the air with a knife. It's blue smog all the way through there. And this is not a highly populated area. This is smog from other areas blowing over the hills and getting trapped, in the valley. So this is not, this is a rural area that's affected by smog so greatly because of that. So, I mean, we have to look at issues, not party. We need to look at issues and actually deal with what's behind those candidates, who's funding those candidates, and deal with the issues at hand. And that's how we represent the constituents. We don't represent the constituents by saying, I'm a Democrat, I'm going to inwardly win the votes of my own party, and then go out to the ballot and lose because we couldn't do it, because we cheated our way through, or because we took corporate donations and we're not going to represent the people. Voters aren't stupid. I know some candidates and some parties think the voters are stupid and they can just steer them wherever they want. They're not stupid. They can see right through a corporate candidate. They can see right through that slick attitude, the dismissiveness, like Dianne Feinstein not showing up for a town hall for 25 years until she's running for re-election. She really gets hammered. Then she shows up twice on both occasions saying that single payer is a government takeover of all medicine, which is opposite of the truth, which I'm sure we'll get into later, but and stuff like that. And then debates. She refuses to debate any of us that are currently running for the Senate race until after the primary. And then she says she'll only do it once. So now she's trying to control the debates. That's not her right to do so. She is a candidate, just like any of the rest of us. She does not have the authority or power to do that or dictate that. But these groups that are holding the debates, if she doesn't show up, they say they're not going to hold the debate. Right. Well, then why have a debate in the first place? Because you're not representing the people. You're representing the wills of one powerful senator that wants to keep her way. She hasn't debated in 25 years. It's way overdue.
For a lot of years, the term socialist was kind of a dirty word in the U.S. political scene. But you claim it. You claim it proudly. So what does that term and its political affiliation mean to you, and what do you think it means to voters today?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the Democratic Socialist of America. If there was actually an article that came out the other day about how many, many more people are running as Democratic Socialists in the U.S. And if you look at younger voters, they actually aren't scared of that word. They didn't go through the Red Scare thing and all the false, accusations and whatnot, and the McCarthyism that we're seeing again today. They didn't deal with all that, and they see the actual benefit of social policies. Social Security is a socialist policy. You're taking from rich people, and giving to the poor, basically. I'd like to see that expanded. I'd like to remove the cap for people who pay in and keep a cap on there for who can benefit from it. So that would make it a more socialist policy because it helps the people at the bottom. So we actually were fairly socialist under FDR, and we've completely changed since then. We even had Eisenhower as a Republican, pass tax rates up to the low 90% on the highest income earners. And people are like, oh my goodness, they take 90% of their income. That's not really how the tax brackets work. But yeah, they take 90% of that last chunk of cash that you make. And what that does is that funds the people at the bottom end. But we're dealing with a lot worse of a battle right now. We're dealing with low wages. So even though you can get into certain government programs if you're poor, why not give the people the wages to begin with? And that's why I support trickle up. And that's quote unquote socialist to support trickle up. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's just economics. You give money to rich people and they put it in the bank, or they invest it in things that don't affect, anyone else. They don't affect the workers. If you give workers money, they're going to immediately go spend it because they have to buy food, pay rent, and do all this stuff. And that money actually does trickle up to those same people at the top.
Well, so, I mean, but just to ask you and have you clarify this. So, I mean, when corporations in particular do get tax breaks, you do see capital investments. You do see the money get recirculated to some extent. Would you not agree with that?
I would not, because we saw the Trump tax cuts actually didn't work out that way. We see corporations right now putting that money in the bank, doing stock buybacks, and there is some investment into infrastructure, but we've actually seen groups of thousands of people laid off from various industries that just gave them $1,000 raises. So it doesn't matter, or $1,000 bonuses. Yeah. They're not even raises. So it doesn't matter how much of a bonus you give someone if you fire them the next day. Because now they have to find new work. And if they can't find new work, which is still hard to find a job in today's climate, even years, almost a decade out, it is a decade after the recession, technically, after the deepest point. And people are still having issues finding jobs. I know people that are almost chronically unemployed because there's just no jobs out there. And then if they do get a job, it doesn't matter whether they're working at McDonald's or working as a secretary at an office or an office administrator. If it's all low pay, they're not going to be able to make rent. And now we have the housing crisis, which is pushed forward by profit. So we have all these things stacking up on top of people, putting all this pressure on people. And once again, it's not a party thing. It's a money thing, it's a profit thing, and we need to fight back against that. We're going to get to the point where people are going to have to revolt against the system that we currently have in place. And it is better to have a peaceful political revolt than have people, go out and actually revolt against their bosses, which we've seen in some instances. People going to work and shooting up their workplace because they're upset at what's going on at their workplace. It's we wouldn't even think about this before, but there's so much pressure that we put on people now. We have taxes that people are concerned about. I'm not for raising taxes necessarily. I'm for broadening the base of who pays taxes, yes, but we also have to have people at the top paying more taxes. Because right now what we have is we have people at the top getting special tax cuts, shielding their money in offshore accounts, while the rest of us, the working class and the middle class, we actually pay taxes, whereas corporations don't, as we discussed earlier. So they're getting tax breaks for what? To lay off workers, to give bonuses that don't really mean anything when you're fired the next day.
Stock buybacks.
Yeah.
Well, huge
stock
CEO
buybacks,
bonuses and head fund
CEO
manager bonuses.
So we got to buy the CEO a new jet. You know, and it's all these different things where that money never makes it to the lower class. There's about 200 people right now that control about $41 trillion. And that's insane. Our whole military expenditures in every war that we're fighting right now is under $1 trillion. So all these people are investing in each other, and now we're seeing that come to fruition and what it's happening on the street. So when you drive down the street and you're driving down what's basically turned into cobblestone, it's not time to blame the government necessarily directly for not fixing the street or the workers for not fixing the street. It's time to blame the corporations for sucking all that money out through subsidies to where we don't have that money to fund the streets. So when we privatize everything, it drains the government's money, and then people point their finger at the government. Where is all that money going? Well, the answer is right in front of us. It's going to corporate subsidies. It's going to tax breaks. They're not paying their fair share. They haven't been for decades. We haven't received a wage raise in 50 years as workers or middle class. And that's a huge issue that we're seeing, and it's not fair to the working class. And that's, why this whole movement of democratic socialism has gone forward and why it's been so successful. Even in red states, we've seen people run as democratic socialists and win. So that's the issues we're facing. We need more democratic socialists. And I come out right up front saying I'm an unapologetic democratic socialist. That's one of the first lines on my bio on my website. And social media, it's right up there that I'm democratic socialist. And I don't shy away from that. And what that does is that puts the ball in the other side's court. And even in the corporate Democrats' court. Now you have to explain to me why I'm wrong. And what I'm telling you is the system you've been running on both sides of the aisle is broken. And you're telling me you're going to either maintain the status quo, which is what the corporate Democrats do, or you're going to make it worse, is what the Republicans do. Why don't make it better? And that's what I'm asking. Why don't we make it better? Why don't we go back to the days where workers could actually survive, or working families could survive on one income, could buy houses in a market that was fair, where profit that wasn't injected in every single situation in life. Now they're trying to privatize water on every front. Can you imagine that? When we get to a point in 10 years where all of our water is privatized and we have to pay high fees for water, you saw what happened with the electric industry and Enron and all that. The whole market crashed. We had a surplus of energy and we weren't using it because we weren't paying for it in certain ways. They were controlling it in certain ways, and all to go back to that profit so they can line their bank accounts.
And they've talked about this with the recent Oroville Dam and different things, and it kind of already feels like the water up here is privately run. I mean, with how powerful these irrigation districts are and everything, and how much sway they have on politicians and political, groups. But I'm a union guy. You're a union guy, and you talk about that. I mean, you learn in The Economist that's how you grow the middle class GDP grows, is when the middle class has good jobs and there's people paying into the tax base and that you're growing them. Small business grows that way. And I just feel like they have just found another way to steal the pile of wealth that, the backs of this country have, kind of built. And it's just, it's gut wrenching to see it. But, as a union guy, you've grown up in your father and grandfather, I think, were both.
Because my grandfather actually worked for the Postal Workers Union, or worked for the Postal Service, so he was a member of that union. And then my father's a carpenter, and he was in that union. I had another uncle who was a carpenter, and a different uncle who was a millwright for quite a while. They were both union. I've been union in some of my jobs. I just actually promoted at my current job, so I was with SAU 1000 through the state. And now I'm actually in the management series, so I can't be a member of a union because of that. So I joined the associations that back the workers. So I'm actually a member of two associations for the managers, both on the statewide level and in the DMV, where I currently work. So.
I've learned a lot. I grew up in Illinois where there was Caterpillar. I remember my dad going to work and there being strikes going on. And then I moved to Indiana, which was a non-union state, and ended up working for Caterpillar and being told, hey, after 3 years of third shift, you got the second shift and then first shift. And, you didn't talk about the right NASCAR driver at the break table. So we're going to need you to go back to third shift. And if you don't, there's nothing else for you to do here. And, that's a layoff that was, unrepresented based on political stuff that dealt with, these engine changeovers on that Obama put in place. And I've learned a lot in being in a union, and sometimes it is a double-edged sword. And I mean, what are some of your experiences as growing up, not only seeing that, but also working with it in your life?
Well, we grew up very poor. We had the electricity turned off on us at times because we couldn't pay the bill. My dad started out at the low end, basically, of the union and worked his way up through the apprenticeship program and became a union member, obviously, and worked his way up to where he had a salary where he can afford, better things. So they're fairly middle class now. But when I was growing up, we grew up with a swamp cooler. I don't know if a lot of people, I tell them that, and they have no idea what that means.
Do you shade the swamp cooler, or do you let it sun hit it?
It was actually on a porch underneath the roof, so it was shaded.
Okay, yeah, there's a debate there too.
Yeah, so yeah, I would say shade.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm taking sides here. I don't want to get too partisan on the issue, but I put it out there. I'm saying
you're
shade
speaking our language.
Yeah. So yeah, we grew up with a swamp cooler. So when you have a swamp cooler in a 2-story house, that's not really helpful. So when we were kids, we would be in the dining room, playing board games and stuff during the summer because in just shorts because it was that hot outside and all we had is that swamp cooler, and that's the only room that would really cool. So when my parents bought
their house...
Did you
have a turning fan?
Oh, no, that's too high class for us at the time.
Because you get that moment when the fan hits you, it's beautiful.
There's a setting that you can set the fan in one direction.
Okay.
But anyway, so we grew up, when my parents bought their house, it didn't have siding on it. It was tar paper on the outside. So that's the kind of house we moved into as kids. So I come from a very rough background. I don't talk about it a lot because you hear every politician say, I was this, I was that, I was run down. And you hear them say that, and it's become to the point where people are like, they don't respond to that anymore because they hear every single person say that. And that's one of the issues that we're facing, I think. We'll get back to your union question, but I think one of the issues we're facing is that we hear the same things from different politicians who don't really represent us, and then we kind of get more critical and move away from politics and more cynical because we don't, see the changes being made. Because once they get into office, they turn their back on us. And you don't have to be a prophet to figure out what that is. And now we know what it is. It's those corporate donations flowing in during the campaign turn into votes. It's this magical little experience. You put the money in one side of the box and like the little math equations in elementary school. And the other side of the box, after that formula comes out, is the vote for the corporation. Imagine that. It's like magic. But we don't have people representing us. And what unions do basically is they fight for the workers. They have the bargaining chip for the workers. We've had a couple court cases go through which basically cut down union dues. So your monthly dues that you pay to the union, they can't use that for political bargaining outside of the actual bargaining process. So you pay a separate fee.
Got to pay a little more now.
Yeah, pay a little more that goes towards politics. You can also be a member of, for my union, it was called COPE, and that's basically a political committee. And you can donate to that. It was $20 extra a month to donate to that. That can actually be used for political donations as well. So for my union, you could have registered non-germane, which means you only paid the cost for the bargaining, for the contracts and protection from the union. And then if you wanted to, you could become a full member and pay more than the non-germane dues, which is only like a $5 or $6 difference. And that little bit of money went to political, candidates and issues and funding for that. And then on top of that, the COPE money went towards that too. That's all well and good. But now we have the Janus case coming forward in the Supreme Court, which would take away all membership dues. And it would become like the postal union on the federal level, which would be what's called an open shop. So what that does basically is you get all the benefits of the union and don't have to pay a dime. So that's the issue, because what that's going to do is on the surface you say, Well, people love their unions. They won't, go away from it. Well, how many Republicans are in these unions and don't necessarily want their money going to politicians and don't realize, at least in California, that doesn't happen. You can opt out of that, basically. They're going to automatically knee-jerk leave the union. So my thing that I talk to people about, when I talk to people who are members of unions and union leadership, I say, listen, we need to democratize the unions that aren't. We have a lot of awesome unions that have their workers very involved. You see the teacher strikes that we were talking about before we came on the air. Yeah. Those are wildcat strikes. These are the teachers deciding, even sometimes outside of the union's authority, deciding we are going to strike and we're going to strike for this and we're not going to stop until we get it.
Highly organized, multi-state.
And even if the union themselves says we should negotiate for less, that's what a wildcat strike is. They go out on their own and say, no, we are going to go and get what we want. That's based on the issues. So what I want to see in a lot of the top-down, the larger unions, is I want to see more democracy. Now, will we lose a couple of unions to Republican voters in some red areas? Yes. But what are we trying to do? Are we trying to represent, or are we trying to push our values on everyone else? And that's the question. So at the end of the day, if you can't sell your union to your members, then that's not the fault of your members. And if I was going into a job and I saw the benefit of the union, they're going to fight for me on the contract. They're going to fight for higher wages. They're going to fight for better benefits. I'm going to sign on to that union when I walk through the door and pay my dues. But if I walk in and the union's like, oh yeah, we're the union, you have to join us, and then they close the door and walk away, I'm not seeing any benefit from that. And you might get a pay raise on your paycheck. You don't know where that came from because there's no communication. So there's some unions out there that need to do a lot more work towards democratizing their unions to communicate the benefits of unions. And I think that's where we're failing right now, is there's some unions that aren't taking that extra initiative, going out and actually talking to their members as much as they should. We need to generate like a new union movement, a new workers movement, and I don't see that really happening as much. It's not just a reactionary thing towards Trump and what he's doing. It's in general we need to do this. And I watched through my career. I mean, I'm 36, so it is what it is. Mm-hmm. But I watched working in private and public industry. I've listened to what people said about unions. I've listened to different workers and their opinions, and a lot of people don't even realize what the benefit of a union is. And that history is not taught in school to a large extent. And so we need to teach that history to union members through our membership and through people going out, instead of maybe knocking the doors for a candidate or an issue, maybe turning inward for a while and actually say, this is what we're doing. Even unions that are great and doing things for the workers and fighting for their benefits and pay, you still need to communicate that back to the workers. Mm-hmm. Hey, look what we did, and a lot of unions do that. They'll have bulletins and stuff, but we need to make sure that message is getting back to the workers.
And you've alluded to it, this question that I have about the size and the scope of unions in this country, which have shrunk over the past few decades.
Yeah.
So you kind of alluded to some of the reasons and some of the meanings behind that. So can you expand upon that a little bit? What unions have been for this country in the past and why we've seen the diminution of membership?
Yeah, we'll get back to socialism, the scary word.
Weekends off.
Yeah. Socialism is weekends off.
That's why we have David Hildebrand here, is because of unions.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm able to come here. Otherwise, I'd be digging a ditch, which I'd probably be doing at home because we're installing some sprinkler systems.
But you're doing it for yourself.
Hard-working guy, man.
Yeah, that's different. But yeah, so basically, we wouldn't have Social Security. So people on the far right that want to cut Social Security are literally cutting their parents' retirement and their grandparents' retirement. That's what they're asking to do. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it on the surface, you're like, oh yeah, that's a bad thing. They're taking my tax money. But when you actually, peel that mask off again and look at it, you're literally stealing money from your parents and the generation that came before you. The generation that fought for a 40-hour work week, that fought for overtime pay, that fought for these benefits. We're literally stripping that from the people that fought for it. Literally, like we're going out in the street for certain issues today. This is nothing compared to what they did. People were killed on the streets by security forces hired by the unions, private security forces, to fight for things that we take for granted, and we don't even realize it. And we don't even see that today because we don't have that. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't have knowledge of that history. And it's a very long, sordid history. And I think that as Americans, we tend to wait until it gets really, really bad and then we speak up. And I think it's going to get there. And a lot of people will say, well, it's here already. Look who's in office. Look what they're doing. And I tell them, look at the American public right now. Have we really woken up? And I would say a lot of people that would identify more on the Democratic side, maybe independents, yes, they've woken up. But when it gets worse, the people on the Republican side are going to wake up too and realize this is cutting my pay and my benefits.
Yeah, they need to wake up. There's only 27-hour positions available anywhere, and especially in small rural places like this. But we're going to run out of time as far as, getting to all these issues. But one thing I want to talk to you about is just your trip to Mexico lately. Usually somebody goes to Mexico, they want to see surf and sun. And I think you had some different reasons for being down there.
So I'll start the story off with basically a 2-word phrase that I want to really sink into your mind. And that's deported veterans. And a lot of people are like, we don't deport veterans. There are hundreds of deported veterans, thousands even. And what happens basically is we say permanent residents, you can serve in our military. And once they get into the military through a bunch of different tactics from recruiters saying, oh, we'll put you on a fast path to citizenship through doing this, they tell them all these things and they're not actually true. They actually don't do anything to benefit them once they sign those papers. So what we have people who serve anywhere from, one tour of service to like a couple decades. They get out of the service, or even while they're in the service, they get into trouble with the law, say they get a DUI, which, yes, that's a bad thing. I understand that. But if you or me get a DUI, I'm assuming we're all citizens here. If you or me get a DUI, we pay our fine, we maybe go to jail, and we're back out. We don't get deported to a different country, especially one that we fought for, one out of a country that we fought for. That doesn't happen. So I'm not a veteran. So I didn't fight for this country. So why would I have some special privileges over someone who fought to defend this country when it comes to citizenship and being deported for a crime? There's one guy, he was on a truck, and this was back in the 60s. He was on a truck in Puerto Rico, so American territory, on a truck for the military. The driver's going too fast, hits a bump, he flies off the truck. That's the last thing he remembers. His knees, both knees blown out. He landed on his knees, both of them blown out. Multiple broken bones. They put him into treatment, put him on narcotic painkillers, and then once they were done with what they felt his treatment was up, basically, they felt he was done, which he wasn't really done. He's still suffering from those injuries. They cut him off clean, off of the, cold turkey, off of the narcotic medications. So, of course, he goes to cover, for that. He goes and seeks out illegal methods to get those painkillers because he's still dealing with serious pain. And they're not giving him the benefits that he deserves to deal with that. They didn't take care of him. He gets caught with those narcotics, and he gets deported to Mexico because he's a Mexican citizen, a permanent resident, but a Mexican citizen. He is deported after his court case. He's been there since. I talked to him in Tijuana. He's been there since. This is someone who was in the military, signed up to defend our country, was doing important work in Puerto Rico, and was sent there. And now they're fighting to get back. We actually had one guy get back recently. That was a 14-year fight. We had another guy, which I regretfully say the only way he got back was he passed away. So he literally came back to the U.S. in a coffin, which is the only way that you can get back into the U.S. without a lengthened court battle that has no determined end that's necessarily going to be in your favor. So the reason I went down there is to spread light on this issue and to show people what we're doing to our own troops. And I was a very small part of it. I was just visiting. I don't believe that I shed any light on this issue, but a lot of other politicians have gone there as well, and people that are elected in office, and have actually shed light on this issue and got some of these cases, in the media and pushed those people to the forefront, basically, and at least one person has gotten back. So there's...
Are they dismayed? Are they upset? Are they angry? Are they confused about why this is happening? Why they bravely served our country and now we've turned our back on them? Is this...
Actually, they're not angry. I did not sense any anger. I sensed a lot of pride for what they did, for how they served the country. They're in Tijuana. 20 minutes from the border, and they have a bunker basically where they all, congregate. There's a couple different, organizations down there that do this work. But one of the places I visited was a bunker. They fly American flags in front of the bunker. They have all their military insignia around. They have military posters on the wall. These are a proud group of people that have been deported, that fought for the U.S., that all they want is to come back to the U.S., to have their citizenship for the country they fought for. There is no anger. There's probably a little bit of resentment. There's no confusion. They understand the laws. They're very organized, and they're fighting for their right to come back. Unfortunately, what we need to see is a change in legislation and have it get signed by either the governor or the president, because we can do a little bit of work here in California alone. But we need to see legislation signed where you can bring those people back to the U.S. And that's basically what it comes down to. So I have a plan basically for all immigrants is amnesty inside the country. So instead of deporting people and saying, go to your consulate or your embassy or our embassy in your nation, reapply for citizenship before you can come back. And that can take 5 to 10 years. Keep them here, keep them working, keep them paying taxes here, legitimatize their presence here in this country, and don't split their family up. When you send a breadwinner who is the only non-citizen in the family over the border, you just put several people on welfare. So if you're a Republican and you're saying deport all the Mexicans, you just deported all the breadwinners, and then the rest of their family is citizens and staying here. They're going on to those welfare programs that you say are getting too much money. Right. So that doesn't jive. So either you're going to let those people earn the living, which you say they need to work and earn their living. That's exactly what they're doing. But instead, you're undercutting those families. You're splitting the families, both on a financial and emotional level, and sending people back to a country that they may not even know. And we're not even brushing the DACA and DAPA issue here. We're just talking about basic immigrants. And then you talk about deported veterans. And it's like, how on earth are we deporting our veterans back to other countries when they came and served in our militaries? Most people, if you told them that, they say, no, we don't do that. They get citizenship for joining the military. No, they do not.
What you're touching on also is this idea that there's kind of a duality of mind, really not a duality of mind within the Republican Party. This idea that the things that we think we're doing that are helping are really hurting. I mean, Paul Ryan, for instance, hasn't been shy at all in his career, which is fortunately ending now, about this idea that he's really wanted to cut welfare. He's really wanted to cut a lot of social backups for people. So there's social safety nets.
Yeah, and there's a difference between Republican voters and Republicans in office. Exactly. And that's a dichotomy that we need to realize is there. Right. Because Republican voters, they have issues that they care strongly about, and they vote on those issues. And if that person that backs those issues happens to be a Republican, that Republican gets into office. Now, it's the same thing on the Democratic side. If that candidate goes forward, taking millions and maybe even billions of dollars of corporate donations, and they go forward and they're elected, they're not going to represent those people's interests. They're going to stay on the surface level and back, key points that those people care about. And if they only vote for that one issue, then they're going to keep reelecting that person in the office, even while that person undercuts their very sustenance, their very livelihood, cuts their wages through different bills, takes away, what they had before. They don't see that when they go to vote. They see abortion, gun rights, all these other things, which both sides of the aisle have very strong opinions on, and that's their right. That's a democracy. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, if you're going to vote for someone, no matter what you believe in, just vote for someone that doesn't take corporate donations. And if they don't exist, maybe it's time to stop voting for people that take corporate donations in general. Maybe it's time to tell them publicly no. And that's another thing that I've been pushing for people within the Democratic Party, at least, is no matter what you do at the end of the day, if you don't want to vote for me for Senate, find another candidate that's corporate free and vote for that candidate. It doesn't matter. As long as they support your values and they're corporate free, vote for that person. Because the minute you accept those corporate donations, you have sold yourself.
Given that the way that the Democratic candidates will tend to stake out positions and the Republican candidates stake out theirs, and you alluded to it, do you think it's more difficult for the Democrats to kind of come to the table and get that idea, the Democratic leaders and people that are running for office, to get the ideas you're talking about because of what they're supposedly representing?
I think the Democrats are trying to play both sides of the aisle, especially with Tom Perez in power right now. Is they're trying to play the corporate side and they're trying to play the political or the populist side. So what Tom Perez is doing now is standing in the middle and doing nothing. Either the Democratic Party is going to be a corporate party or the Democratic Party is going to be a people's party. And he refuses to make that choice. And that's what's going on right now. And that's why you see no movement on anything in the Democratic or the DNC on the federal level. You see no movement. There's no support. Their donations are abysmal because there's no message.
And no cohesive message where the right has a cohesive message. They can go in one day and say Democrats are obstructionist, and it is everywhere on every channel and everything, where the Democrats' message is all over the place and different people and saying different things and trying to court different things.
And obviously we have a lot of infighting in the party, in the progressive movement in general, which I consider myself part of, is we not only have the corporate Democrats and the progressive Democrats, which I consider the non-corporate Democrats, fighting amongst themselves. We also have the Green Party, Peace and Freedom Party, and the people who Dem-exited and are now not a member of any party. So we have those people out there as well. We need to build a big tent among progressives, among people on the left, and we're so busy slitting each other's throats and having drama online. Like you would be amazed at the stuff I've seen. Like for no reason, someone will come out and say, "Oh, so-and-so's campaign is such and such. Oh, they can never make it." And this is coming from another campaign that's a grassroots campaign and literally has as much chance as I do for and actually getting elected. And they're actually attacking another campaign, another non-corporate grassroots campaign. So if we can't unify on that level, then we're never going to make it.
Well, I mean, and enthusiasm is a great thing. I mean, you think about all this enthusiasm that has been generated here in the grassroots on the left side of the political spectrum is a really good thing in totality. But these issues you're talking about are problems that need to be worked out within that
serious
enthusiasm.
We need to unify as a progressive movement. And that what that means is that when we go to the ballot, we have the issues that we want, but we need to focus on one candidate in each race. And a lot of people will not do that because they don't want to cross party lines. So the minute me and Gail McLaughlin, who's running for lieutenant governor, first talked, I endorsed her. She endorsed me. She's a no party preference candidate. So I've gotten some flack for that from inside the party. I don't care because we need to unify. The issue that I see is some Democrats will never vote Green or never vote Peace and Freedom or never vote no party preference because they're Democrats and they're only going to vote Democratic. Green Party people will never vote Democratic because that's the quote-unquote corporatist party. So you have people, candidates like me, which there's tons of us right now running, corporate-free, running to take over the party and make it a working-class party. I'll vote for a Green. I'll vote for a Peace and Freedom. I'll vote for no party preference as long as their issues are correct.
And I wish the party would do that if they understood that, red districts, blood red districts like this one, where we almost need a purple candidate who would be, more likely than a Democratic candidate to win. And if there's no Democratic in the race, why throw just a name in the race? Why not just endorse the person that is somewhat likely to upset, and instead of less than likely or highly unlikely? So I agree with David on that point. I get a lot of flack. I get, not that I'm a saboteur or anything, but just like I like Green Party candidates, and I'm friends with some of those people in some of those areas, and truly, I just like people's passion when they come out and run, and they have a big enough heart to enter into that sort of thing. And I have a great respect for it. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, I don't see anything wrong with it either. I think that, in my personal view of it, I mean, I think that to me, there's so much. I hate to use the word evil because I don't think evil is the right word, but there's so much that I abhor about the right wing Republican views on government and the purpose of government and the way government can help people's lives, that I almost want to unify around a single message to combat that. And to me, it seems like a more centrist Democratic message is broader.
I will counter your argument with the 2016 primary. So whole north end of the state voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary when it came to the Democratic candidate. He won, hands down in an open primary. I personally know several Republicans, not Democrats, Republicans, who voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary. Guess who they voted for in the general?
Donald Trump.
I assume
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I'm told that that's just crazy. No. Yeah. And I
people
see the
say that.
numbers, and I say no.
And
there
the
are
reason,
more Republicans.
And let's circle back to the very beginning, to what I said at the beginning. The reason why is because we need an anti-corporate, anti-establishment candidate. No matter which party, that's the candidate that's going to win. When we didn't put our candidate on our side forward as an anti-corporate, anti-establishment, the populist candidate on the other side, who's basically corporate now, who's basically just in the same boat, but he was anti-establishment, off the cuff, good old boy type mentality, people went towards that because they didn't want to see the cut and dry status quo. We're going to keep doing the same thing.
But I just can't see how anybody could vote for Donald Trump who has a heart.
And that's
anybody else.
With all due respect, I think that's a weakness that a lot of people have. That they need to really think about all the different issues that face people's life and how little of a message the Democratic Party had in the general election.
They wanted to blow it up.
Trump?
They wanted to blow it up.
I couldn't do it.
That's what I'm saying. But I couldn't imagine anybody with a heart and a mind would vote for a Donald Trump.
They wanted to blow it up. They
else.
wanted to screw things up.
I know,
I have a theory about the primary election. So you basically had three candidates at the end because Trump had his cinched early.
Yeah.
And then you had Bernie Sanders and you had Hillary Clinton. So I tell people that wanted everything to basically stay the same and stay quote unquote safe. They wanted to vote safe, voted Hillary. The people who wanted to blow the system up but cared about what happened the next day voted for Bernie. So they wanted to blow up like the hyper-capitalist corporatist system, but they cared about what happened when the sun rose the next day. They wanted to see something better in place. That's the Bernie voters. Then you got the Trump voters. They wanted to blow everything up and they didn't care what happened.
And watch it burn.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of Trump voters that are low information voters, and that's not in their detriment. These are busy people. They have families and whatnot. They're at home. They're at work. They're taking care of their kids and raising their kids. They don't see Trump talking about a 40-foot tall wall and how Mexicans are rapists. They don't see that. They're at work. They're doing hard labor. I don't know if you guys, you said you were a member of the trades. I used to do hard labor. I used to pour concrete. When I got home from work after a 3-hour commute to Los Gatos from Lodi and came, all the way back, all I wanted to do is eat and go to sleep. And that was my life.
You don't really hear a lot of politics at that point either. And I guess that gets my question of getting back to keeping it light of kind of like, what did you listen to on the drive up here? Like what?
Actually, when I come up here, it's 106.7, which is the local rock station. I tend to
shout out to them. Then.
Yeah, I have my own method of doing things. I have my own music basically, and I don't like to listen to my own music when I travel to different areas. So if I'm going through Central California, I'm generally listening to country because that's what comes on in that area.
Well, what's in your CD player right now?
CD player? What's that? What's in my phone? What's in my phone? Run the Jewels, which is hip hop rap genre. Killer Mike actually campaigned with Bernie. Mike. I actually was a fan of Run the Jewels before I was a fan of Bernie's, which is kind of the opposite of most people. Aurora Axness, she's basically a pop star from Northern Europe. So she's Swedish, and so it's completely opposite genres, right? Right. So I go after people who have more like they have like uniqueness and they have talent at the same time, and they say something different. So I mean, in every genre of music, you have people who basically just repeat the lines, that they heard before. Like in rap, you'll hear people wave your hands in the air and shake it like a salt shaker. And you hear that through every single song you hear. And then someone will come along, like Run the Jewels or someone else, and they'll say something different. They'll have a message that resonates, and they'll actually have politics behind what they're saying. And they care about people. And they're trying to tell people, the system's broken. And if we don't fix it, it's going to become violent. And that's what Run the Jewels is basically saying, especially in their third album, which is kind of, I view it as a review of the 2016 election. Because if you listen to like half the songs in there, it seems like they're directly related. So, and what they're basically saying is we need to work against the system, and if we don't, then it's going to go to the streets, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And then Aurora, on the other hand, is completely opposite. She's like a hopeful progressive type, personality, whereas she's more of an empath. She views the world through her emotions, and that's what she sings about. And it's like she calls herself dark pop in some interviews, but basically it's this happy sounding music with a very, very dark message underneath that's basically saying this is what's happening in the world. What are we going to do about it? But it's not in your face like something like Run the Jewels would be.
Sounds like Northern European music in a sense.
Yeah, and they're a Democratic Socialist country.
Right,
so.
right. Well, we got a couple minutes left, David, before I let you go. You win the seat and you go to Washington. It's very possible that at some point in your term, there would be articles of impeachment that would come out of the House of Representatives and come to the Senate. How would you feel about that, first of all? The appropriateness of that, and what matters would you look at within the context of, say, an impeachment proceeding for Donald Trump?
So if there's grounds for impeachment, then I would definitely vote for impeachment on those issues. What I need to see is this investigation wrap up. I want to see the evidence. I don't want to jump on saying there's an investigation, basically, because we've seen the Republicans do the same thing. They did it to Hillary during her whole campaign, and before that even. With the Bengazi thing.
Sure.
We don't need another Bengazi thing to embarrass us, and that's what we're seeing right now. Everything in the news is Russia, 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 and we don't actually hear the issues that affect the people, like single-payer healthcare, like a living wage, all these things that actually affect people, tuition-free college and trade schools, so we can actually have a workforce that has a good living and not a burden of debt. We don't hear about all these things because all we're talking about is Russia and impeachment. And at the end of the day, the likelihood of Trump being impeached before at least his first term is up, just based on time frames, is very unlikely. And what I always remind people is Trump might be the guy to hit the nuclear button, and that's the only difference between him and Pence. And Pence is worse in a lot of ways. He's a theocrat. So he's going to come in, an experienced guy who's not off the cuff, back and forth, can't make up his mind. No, he knows exactly what he wants. He knows exactly how to get it. He's in the process. He's in that system. He knows what to do. So if we impeach Trump, who's a wild card, who may vote our way sometimes, and then we get Pence, then now we have a machine working against us. So we see that a little bit now because Trump's basically just a puppet, and all the people behind him are actually pushing stuff forward, and he's just signing off on it because he's the president. So if we saw Pence get in, you'd see an iron grip around all of our rights, our civil rights, abortion rights, all of that would be squeezed. And we'd see that a lot more up front. So at the end of this argument, I would still say that if we had reason to impeach Trump, I would do it. But I just want to remind people that when we distract ourselves from this one issue from every other issue, that's another reason why Democrats may not do as well as they think they will in 2018. Yeah. Because if all we're talking about is Russia and impeachment, and people haven't seen impeachable offenses yet, just a lot of talk, they're not going to vote Democrat because of that. That's not a positive message because that's not a message at all. We're not talking about the issues that matter.
And you alluded to a lot of those issues, and I'm sorry we didn't get to them all in this hour. That was a very fast hour.
We need to have you back.
We'll have you back.
I'll have to.
There was a lot of the single payer thing. I think we definitely wanted to get to and talk about because that's important as well as.
And your favorite movie, or what was a better movie, Red Dawn or Star Wars: Attack of the Clones?
Red Dawn, hands down.
Right, you just got a lot. You just won the election.
And not the new version of Red Dawn.
Yes, let's be specific.
You can throw that into the dumpster.
The Patrick
original
Swayze, Powers Booth.
Red Dawn. I grew up on that movie.
That's a great movie.
Me and my cousin loved that movie. We watched it all the time. So that was our movie.
You're a true patriot.
We would yell Wolverine at each other randomly sometimes.
Right.
Wolverines. But so
David, thanks for joining us today. It really was a lot of fun. We got a lot of good information. I think our viewers did too. So that's our show. Thanks again to David Hildebrand for joining us. We appreciate
thanks for having me.
It was our pleasure. And don't forget, NorCal News is available wherever you download your podcast. So check us out and subscribe. We can also be found on Facebook at NorCal News Now, where you can post your comments and suggestions for upcoming podcast topics and guests. So thanks to all of you for tuning in, and we'll be back at you soon with another episode of NorCal News Now. So long.